Hey guys, welcome back. It's Jeb Smith. Today I'm talking about the topic of firing a real estate agent. Can you fire a realtor? What are your options when you're not happy with regards to your representation? The reason this comes up actually is I just received a call from someone who has their house listed with another real estate agent, and they're not happy with the service, and they called me to ask their options. So I thought it'd be cool to explain this a little bit in more detail on a video, because there's not a lot of content out there on it, and help you understand what your options are as a seller, as a buyer in this case. So generally speaking, when you are a seller and or a buyer in the real estate world, a lot of times you are obligated to sign not obligated, but there's a contract required between the brokerage and the seller, or the brokerage and the buyer. In the seller's case, it's a listing agreement. In the buyer's case, it's a buyer-broker agreement. And now these are both binding contracts. So they're a contract, it's legally binding, which means that they're not easy to get out of. And that's why we're going to talk about this today. So, as a seller in the state of California, I would say that the majority of listing agreements are exclusive right to sell, which gives a brokerage and an agent the opportunity to represent you as a listing agent, and there's a contract that goes along with that, and part of that contract is a date, a time frame which they're allowed to represent you on the sale of that property. And so during that time frame, that is the brokerage that is representing you. And so if you want to cancel that contract, you've either got to prove that the agent wasn't upholding their side of the contract, doing something unethical, or there was something in the contract that they said they would do that they haven't done, and or the listing agent has to agree to cancel that contract. That's the only way it cancels. And then secondly, as a buyer-broker agreement, so as a buyer buying a property, a lot of times there are buyer-broker agreements used where the buyer hires a real estate agent and a brokerage, if you will, to represent them to purchase property. So there's a lot of agents out there that have these signed that tie buyers to them specifically when buying property. That means that as a buyer, if you've signed one of these, you're required to use that agent to represent you, or that brokerage to represent you on the purchase of your home. And if you go out and buy a property with another agent during the time frame that contract is binding, you're actually required to pay a commission to the agent that you had the contract with. So, you want to make sure that you've hired the right person in both cases, right? So you want to make sure you've hired the right agent to represent you as a buyer. And if you're selling your property, you want to make sure you've done your due diligence too as a seller to make sure that you've hired the right person, so that you're not having to cancel these contracts, because it's very hard to do. I will tell you a little bit off topic here. I've been in the business for 16 years. I've never had a buyer-broker agreement signed. I don't personally believe in them, but there's a lot of agents out there that do, and that's completely okay. And a lot of people want you to have them signed. Real estate coaches, a lot of brokerages require them to be signed. I don't. I want to work with people who want to work with me. So if I'm working with a buyer and they just choose to go off and have another agent represent them, then that's probably not the kind of buyer that I wanted to work with to start. So, trust me, it doesn't feel good, but I just don't believe in having them signed, because I don't want somebody to feel like they have to work with me. They're tied to me per a contract. I want them to work with me because they want to work with me. And the same goes for the listing side. When I get a listing agreement signed, I tell people up front, hey, look, if you're not happy with me during any point of the contract, let's talk about it. But if you don't feel like I'm the right fit for you, I'll let you out of the contract. I'm not going to hold somebody to a contract that doesn't want to be tied to the contract, if you will. If they don't want me to represent them, then you know what? I'm happy to move on. We both go our separate ways and what have you. So understand that there are agents out there that will let you out of contracts. I'm one of those, but I will tell you there's a lot of agents out there that won't. So they'll hold you to that contract. And that doesn't mean, like, as a seller that you're required to sell your house. It just means that if you do sell your house during that period and that agent has your home listed, that he's obligated to get a commission on the sale of your property. And so just again, it goes back to understanding who you're hiring from the start. Anything that's agreed upon, make sure it's in writing in the contract. So if an agent like myself tells you, hey, look, I'll let you out of the contract with a 24-hour notice, then have me put it in writing in the contract so that it's there. The other thing I mentioned is that you know, if you can prove that the agent hasn't done something or hasn't upheld their part of the contract, then that's an opportunity for you to get out of the contract as well. That's not as easy because it does require legwork to do that. I mean, you've got to get the brokerage to agree to cancel. So basically, as a seller, as a buyer, you just want to make sure you're hiring the right real estate agent initially so that you don't have to cancel the contracts. But in the cases where you do, you know, the agent has to agree to it in order to cancel it, and or the brokerage has to agree to it. You know, just because a real estate agent agrees to it doesn't necessarily mean the brokerage is going to agree to it, because the agreement is actually between the brokerage and the seller and or the buyer versus the agent and the buyer or seller. So, you know, you need everybody on board in order to cancel it. And as I was mentioned, just get things in writing if it's something that, you know, you're potentially worried about. And back to the start, is it, you know, can you fire them? Yes and no. You know, it's not, it's kind of a gray area. You can definitely delist your property from the market, like I mentioned, but there's still a contract there. And so just because you want to cancel the contract, you know, doesn't mean that you can just cancel it and go out and hire somebody else. I mean, a lot of times what will happen is once the contract is, you know, if you say you want to remove your house from the market and I wasn't willing to cancel it, it would go into a withdrawn status. And so I would still have the contract technically until that date expired. And now once the date expires, then you can go out and hire a different real estate agent and not be obligated to the first person that you were in contract with. So, you know, there's a lot that goes on there, you know, but comment below if you have additional questions. Reach out to me directly. I'm happy to address them. I know a lot of times in videos, it's not as easy to convey information as it is just to have a conversation and answer questions. But as always, I do appreciate you taking the time to watch. And, you know, if I can be of assistance to you in any way, feel free to reach out, as I'm here to help. Would love the opportunity. Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.